The neon-soaked underbelly of Helios Outpost pulsed with life, a stark contrast to the void of space that surrounded it. Anders Cade watched the bar's patrons from his corner, one hand wrapped around a glass of synthetic whiskey, the other resting near the blaster strapped to his thigh. Old habits died hard. 8 years in Earth. Navy had taught him to keep his back to the wall and his eyes on the exits. 3 years since his dishonorable discharge hadn't dulled those instincts. A thoraxian traitor stumbled past chitinous appendages clicking against the metal floor. Anders traced the alien's path, assessing for threats, before returning his attention to the door. The cantina sat on the edge of the shipyard district, where the smell of fuel and the sounds of maintenance drones created a constant backdrop of frontier life. This far from Earth jurisdiction credits flowed freely, and questions were kept to a minimum, exactly how Anders preferred it. Still playing Soldier Cade. The voice belonged to Jace Anders's former wingman from his Navy days. Jace slid into the seat opposite his scarred face, split in a crooked grin. "Some habits keep you alive," he added, signaling the bartender for a drink. Anders took another sip, savoring the burn. "What do you want, Jace? Last I checked, you weren't exactly eager to associate with traitors." Jace winced. "That was before I knew the details. Besides, we both know that court-martial was political." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I've got something big. Exclusive contract, high risk, higher reward. Not interested in another smuggling run that'll land me in a penal colony. This isn't smuggling. It's a rescue operation, legitimate with official clearance." Jace produced a small hollow projector, placing it on the table between them. "High Counselor Thalen himself requested you specifically." Anders nearly choked on his drink. Thalen, of the Athetheran High Council. What would one of their aristocrats want with a human pilot, especially one with my reputation? The hollow projector flickered to life, displaying the stern, angular face of an Athetheran official. The distinctive silver-blue skin and tapered features marked him as high-born among their kind. When he spoke, the translator rendered his words with an unmistakable, aristocratic inflection. "Anders Cade, your reputation as a pilot precedes you. Your skills in navigating the Ceres asteroid belt during the Martian conflict remain unmatched. I require those skills for a matter of utmost importance. Meet with me, and I will explain further. Compensation will be significant." The message ended, leaving Anders staring at the space where the projection had been. "What's the job?" Jace's smile widened. "The royal vessel Astral Dawn is stranded in the Vortex Nebula. On board the twin princesses, Elixa and Cell." Anders let out a low whistle. "The vortex that's impossible to navigate. The magnetic interference alone would—" "Which is why they need the best pilot in the quadrant," Jace interrupted. "And a human one at that. Our nervous systems handle neural interfaces better than theirs. Thalen believes you could pilot a specially modified ship through the nebula, where Athetheran pilots failed. Why risk valuable royalty in the vortex in the first place?" Jace shrugged. "Diplomatic mission gone wrong. Military secrets no one's saying. But word is, they've got maybe 3 days of life support left." Anders drained his glass, considering. His account had been in the red for months. Ship repairs, docking fees, and the occasional necessary bribe had drained what little he'd salvaged after his discharge. But something about this stank of politics and politics had cost him his career once already. "What's the catch, Jace? Why me?" "No catch. Thalen's waiting at docking bay 17. Hear him out, then decide." Jace stood, tossing credits onto the table. "Oh, and Cade, clean yourself up. These royals don't take kindly to humans at the best of times." After Jace left, Anders remained turning the proposition over in his mind. The Vortex Nebula was a sailor's grave, a swirling mass of ionized gas and gravitational anomalies that had claimed countless ships. No pilot had successfully navigated its depths and returned to tell the tale. But then again, none of those pilots had been Anders Cade. An hour later, Anders approached docking bay. 17. His worn flight jacket exchanged for a slightly less worn civilian tunic. The bay doors opened to reveal a sleek Athetheran shuttle, its organic curves and luminescent hull markings, a stark contrast to the utilitarian human vessels that populated most of the outpost. A contingent of silver-armored guards flanked the shuttle's ramp, their posture stiffening as Anders approached. At the center stood High Counselor Thalon, taller and more imposing in person than his hollow had suggested. The Athetheran's four-fingered hands were clasped behind his back, his vertical pupils narrowing as they assessed the human before him. Captain Cade. Thalon began the translator at his throat, converting his resonant speech. Your promptness is appreciated. It's just Cade now, Anders corrected. The Navy and I had a difference of opinion about acceptable casualties. Thalon's expression remained impassive. Indeed. Your refusal to sacrifice a civilian transport to complete your mission was viewed poorly by your superiors. Among my people, it would have been seen as honorable. Anders kept his face neutral, surprised by the Athetheran's knowledge of his past. Jace said something about a rescue in the vortex. That true. Direct as humans often are. Thalon gestured toward the shuttle. Please, this conversation is better conducted in private. The shuttle's interior was cool and dimly lit with seating arranged in a circular pattern around a central hollow projector. Anders took a chair, noting its discomfort, clearly not designed for human physiology. Thalon activated the projector, and a three-dimensional map of the Vortex Nebula materialized its violet and crimson gases, swirling in mesmerizing patterns. A small, blinking light indicated a position deep within its folds. The Astral Dawn. Thalon explained, carrying Princesses Elixa and Cell on a diplomatic mission to the Corvallian Collective. They were ambushed at the nebula's edge and sought refuge within. Our pursuit vessels lost them in the interference, but we received a distress beacon 3 days ago. And you want me to fly in and get them out, Anders finished. What makes you think I can navigate where your pilots failed? This. Thalon produced a small crystal device. The Nomad, a hybrid vessel with an experimental neural interface. It requires a pilot with exceptional spatial awareness and the unique neuroplasticity found in humans. Anders leaned forward despite himself. You built a ship specifically to navigate the vortex. We've been developing it for years. The princess's situation has accelerated our timeline. Thalon's voice remained measured, but Anders caught the slight tension. Atmospheric analysis suggests they have approximately 72 hours of life support remaining. And the compensation? Anders asked, hating himself a little for the mercenary question, but knowing his desperation left little room for nobility. 5 million credits, Thalon stated flatly. Plus, full restoration of your reputation and flight credentials throughout Athetheran space. Anders struggled to keep his expression neutral. That amount would clear his debts and set him up comfortably for years. The restored credentials would mean legitimate work again, not just the shadowy jobs that kept food on his table and fuel in his engines. I need some modifications to your Nomad. Anders said, decision already made. If this interface is as direct as you suggest, I'll need stimulant filters in the medical bay and a manual override for the navigation systems. Thalon's brow ridges rose slightly, the Athetheran equivalent of surprise. You accept then? I accept that I'm going to look at your ship, Anders clarified. If it's what you claim and my modifications are approved, then yes, I'll attempt the rescue. Attempt. Thalon's translator couldn't quite capture the edge in his voice. Anders met his gaze evenly. That's all anyone can promise with the vortex. But if anyone can get your princesses out, it's me. The journey to the Athetheran cruiser took less than an hour. As they docked with the massive vessel, Anders felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the same sensation he'd experienced when first joining the Navy. Possibility mixed with danger, the unknown stretched before him. The Nomad waited in the cruiser's central hangar, and Anders's breath caught at the sight of it. Smaller than a traditional rescue vessel, it resembled a predatory fish, its hull a seamless blend of metal and bionic materials that seemed to pulse with life. Lateral fins housed maneuvering thrusters that could articulate in ways he'd never seen before, and the cockpit bubble offered a nearly 360-degree view. "She's beautiful," he murmured, approaching the ship with reverence. "She's yours," Thalon replied, "if you can bring our princesses home." For the next 12 hours, Anders worked with the Athetheran engineers, customizing the Nomad to his specifications. The neural interface was both more sophisticated and more invasive than he'd anticipated, a crown of fiber optic tendrils that would connect directly to his brainstem and nervous system, allowing him to feel the ship as an extension of his own body. "The sensation can be overwhelming," warned the lead engineer, an Athetheran female named Vris. "The feedback loop means you'll feel what the ship feels: pressure, resistance, even pain, if the hull is damaged." "I've used neural links before," Anders assured her, though nothing quite this advanced. "What's the integration time?" 6 hours minimum for a human," she replied. "And you'll need at least 4 to adjust before attempting the vortex." Anders nodded, running calculations in his head. "That leaves us 52 hours to reach the astral dawn and get out, cutting it close." As the engineers continued their work, Anders studied the Nebula charts, memorizing what little was known about its currents and gravitational eddies. The vortex was less a stable formation and more a constantly shifting maze with radiation belts that could fry a ship's systems in seconds, and pockets of super-dense matter that could crush a hull like an eggshell. "You should rest," Thalon's voice interrupted his concentration. "The neural integration will tax your system severely." Anders glanced up from the charts. "I'll rest when the princesses are safe. Tell me about them, it helps to know who I'm risking my neck for." Thalon seemed to consider the request before nodding slowly. "Princess Elixa is our foremost expert in xenotechnology. Brilliant, analytical, perhaps too focused on progress at times. Princess Cell is her twin, but her talents lie in different directions: strategic command, combat, doctrine. They complement each other, though their approaches often conflict." "Twins with opposite personalities," Anders mused. "That'll make for an interesting rescue. Why were they sent to the Corvallians? Aren't they your rivals?" "Politics are complex," Thalon said, a non-answer if Anders had ever heard one. "What matters is their safe return." Before Anders could press further, Vris approached. "The Nomad is ready, Captain. We can begin neural integration whenever you are prepared." Anders took a deep breath, looking from the charts to the ship. No time like the present. The integration process was agonizing. Anders lay in a reclined chair within the Nomad's cockpit as the neural crown descended its tendrils, seeking connection points along his spine and skull. Each contact felt like ice, followed by fire, his nervous system rebelling against the intrusion before gradually accepting it. Hours blurred together as his brain remapped itself, learning to interpret new inputs from the ship's sensors. By the 4th hour, he could feel the hangar's artificial gravity pulling at the Nomad's hull, could sense the minute vibrations of the cruiser's engines through the docking clamps. By the 6th, he could extend the landing gear with a thought and adjust thruster output with the mental equivalent of flexing a muscle. When he finally opened his eyes, Vris was observing him with clinical interest. "Your integration rate exceeds our projections. How do you feel?" "Like I've grown wings," Anders replied, his voice hoarse from disuse. "And fangs. This ship wants to hunt." "The Nomad was designed for the vortex," she confirmed. "Its systems are mostly autonomous, leaving you free to focus on the piloting. Are you ready for a test flight?" Anders initiated pre-launch diagnostics with a thought, feeling the ship's systems respond like limbs stretching after sleep. "Let's see what she can do." The test flight confirmed what Anders had suspected: the Nomad was the most responsive vessel he'd ever piloted. It translated his intentions into action with barely a delay, banking and rolling through space with predatory grace. The neural interface allowed him to feel approaching objects before sensors could detect them, an instinctive awareness that would prove crucial in the nebula's chaotic environment. When he returned to the hangar, a small crowd of Athetheran crew had gathered to watch. Their expressions were unreadable to human eyes, but their posture suggested something between awe and anxiety. Thalon met him as he disembarked. "Impressive. Our simulations suggested the maneuvers you performed would be theoretically possible, but none of our test pilots achieved them." Anders rolled his shoulders, still adjusting to the strange dual awareness of his body and the ship. The Nomad responds to intuition as much as command. Your pilots might be overthinking it. He glanced at the chronometer on the hangar wall. We've got 48 hours now. I need to rest, then we launch. 6 hours, Thalon agreed. Not a minute more. I've arranged quarters for you. Anders's assigned cabin was Spartan, but comfortable enough for human physiology. He lay down, intending only to close his eyes for a moment, but exhaustion claimed him immediately. His dreams were strange, unfamiliar star patterns, violet gases, swirling like living things, and the distant sound of voices calling for help. He awoke to Vriss shaking his shoulder gently. "It is time, Captain Cade. The Nomad is fueled and ready." Final preparations moved quickly. Anders donned a modified flight suit, its fabric designed to maintain constant contact with his skin for better neural transmission. As he approached the Nomad, he could already feel it reaching for him, the connection strengthening with proximity. Thalon stood at the base of the boarding ramp, his tall figure rigid, with what Anders now recognized as poorly concealed worry. The coordinates of the distress beacon have been programmed into the navigation system. Once inside the nebula, however, conventional navigation will be useless. "I'll find them," Anders assured him, surprised by his own confidence. "The Nomad and I speak the same language now." "Then I wish you good hunting, Anders Cade," Thalon said formally, bowing his head slightly. "May the currents guide you to our princesses and back safely." Anders nodded in acknowledgement before ascending the ramp. As he settled into the pilot's chair, the neural crown descended automatically, reconnecting with his nervous system in a flash of sensation that was becoming almost pleasant. The ship purred to life around him, systems initializing in perfect sequence. Nomad to control. He sub-vocalized the ship's communications, translating his thoughts to transmission. "Ready for launch." "Cleared for launch, Nomad," came the response. "May fortune favor the bold." Anders smiled grimly as the hangar doors parted, revealing the diamond-studded blackness of space. Beyond, just visible as a distant smudge of color, waited the Vortex Nebula. With a thought, he engaged the Nomad's engines, and they leapt forward into the void. The journey to the nebula's edge took just under 5 hours, during which Anders familiarized himself further with the Nomad's capabilities. The ship carried minimal weapons, just enough for defense, but its shields were cutting-edge, designed to withstand the nebula's radiation and gravitational stresses. As they approached, the true scale of the vortex became apparent. It stretched across his viewport, like a vast, violent sea, its gases churning in hypnotic patterns of purple-crimson and electric blue. Lightning-like discharges arced between denser clouds, and the gravimetric sensors screamed warnings about the turbulence ahead. Anders felt a flutter of doubt as he contemplated the chaos before him. No wonder no ship had successfully navigated this. It was a storm, unlike any other, with currents that could tear a vessel apart in seconds. 43 hours until life support failure on the Astral Dawn. He reminded himself aloud, steeling his resolve. "Let's go fishing." With a deep breath, he guided the Nomad forward, crossing the threshold into the nebula's outer layers. Immediately the ship shuddered around him, buffeted by forces that registered as pressure against his own skin through the neural link. The sensation was disorienting, but not painful yet. Conventional sensors began failing almost immediately, their readings distorted by the intense radiation and magnetic interference. Anders closed his eyes, relying instead on the direct sensory feed from the Nomad's hull. He could feel the currents, now swirling eddies of charged particles, and gravitational fluctuations. There was a pattern to it, he realized, not random chaos, but something almost intentional, like a vast slow-motion dance. He adjusted course, allowing the Nomad to flow with these currents, rather than fighting against them. Hours passed as Anders delved deeper into the nebula each moment, requiring absolute concentration. The neural interface fed him constant data, radiation levels, hull integrity, energy reserves, all translated into sensations his brain could process instinctively. A burning at his fingertips warned of radiation spikes, while a pressure at his back indicated gravitational drag. Twice he had to retreat from dead ends, swirling maelstroms of energy that would have shredded even the Nomad's advanced shields. Once he navigated through a field of crystalline structures that hummed with resonant energy, their surfaces reflecting the nebula's light in mesmerizing patterns. "I can feel the nebula breathing," he murmured to himself, the realization both terrifying and exhilarating. The vortex wasn't just a phenomenon, it was almost an entity unto itself, with rhythms and patterns that responded to his presence. 17 hours into the journey, the Nomad's long-range sensors detected a faint energy signature, matching the astral dawn's profile. Anders adjusted course, following this thread of hope through the nebula's labyrinth. The path grew increasingly treacherous, with radiation belts that required split-second evasive maneuvers and gravity wells that threatened to trap the ship in endless orbits. Through it all, Anders maintained his connection with the Nomad, their consciousnesses blurring at the edges, until he couldn't tell where his body ended and the ship began. It was intoxicating, this sense of freedom and power, but also exhausting. Every decision, every adjustment demanded energy from his already taxed system. Finally, 22 hours after entering the nebula, the astral dawn came into view. The royal vessel hung suspended in a relatively calm pocket of space, its sleek silver hull marred by scoring and impact damage. Its running lights flickered weakly, and only minimal power signatures registered on the Nomad's sensors. Anders guided his ship alongside, initiating docking procedures with careful precision. Through the viewport, he could see movement inside the Astral Dawn figures in environment suits, gathering near the airlock. As the docking collar sealed with a metallic clang, Anders disengaged from the neural interface, the separation leaving him momentarily disoriented and hollow. He staggered to the airlock, his legs unsteady after so many hours seated. The inner door cycled open to reveal 4 figures. 2 were clearly royal guards, their armor more ornate than the standard Athetheran military. The other 2, though wearing the same environmental suits, carried themselves with unmistakable authority. One moved with precise economical gestures, while the other's stance suggested combat readiness. "Princesses," Anders greeted, bowing slightly despite his exhaustion. "Anders Cade at your service. High Counselor Thalon sent me to bring you home." The figures removed their helmets in unison. Though twins, the differences between them were immediately apparent. Princess Elixa's features were sharper, her expression calculating as she assessed Anders and the Nomad. Princess Sel's face was more angular, with a scar tracing her left jawline and eyes that evaluated him as one might a new weapon. "A human pilot." Elixa noted her translator, rendering her words with clinical precision. "Fascinating. The neural interface integration appears successful." "You made good time," Sel added, her tone more approving. "We calculated at least 30 hours for a rescue vessel to reach us, if one could penetrate the nebula at all." Anders gestured toward the Nomad's interior. "We can discuss the technical details once we're underway. Your life support is running on fumes, and we've got a long journey back." "Our ship's data cores must be recovered," Elixa insisted. "They contain irreplaceable research." "And our crew requires evacuation," Sel added. "We lost 3 in the initial attack, but 14 remain." Anders frowned. The Nomad could accommodate the additional passengers, but just barely, and the added mass would affect maneuverability. "We'll need to transfer quickly. I recommend emergency protocols, essential personnel, and materials only." Elixa nodded sharply. I'll oversee the data transfer and technical crew, cell coordinate security and medical evacuation. The next hour was a blur of activity as the Astral Dawn's crew transferred to the Nomad. Anders supervised the redistribution of weight, ensuring the ship's balance wouldn't be compromised. Meanwhile, Elixa integrated her ship's schematics with the Nomad systems, while Cell drilled the combined crew on emergency procedures. As the final preparations for departure were underway, Anders returned to the neural interface, reconnecting with the Nomad systems. Immediately, he sensed something wrong, a subtle disharmony in the life support rhythms, a hesitation in the environmental controls. Something's off," he muttered, extending his awareness through the ship's diagnostic systems. The anomalies were small, easy to miss without the direct neural connection, a power fluctuation in the oxygen recyclers, a misaligned setting in the atmospheric regulators. With growing suspicion, Anders traced the irregularities to their source. What he found sent a chill through him despite the interface's emotional dampeners. The malfunctions weren't random failures. They were deliberate sabotage, carefully designed to appear as system degradation rather than intentional tampering. "We have a problem," he announced, disengaging partially from the interface to address the princesses. "Someone's been tampering with the life support junctions. If we'd launched without checking, we'd have lost atmosphere 6 hours into the return journey." Elixa's expression hardened. "Show me." Anders guided her to the maintenance access panel, where he detected the clearest evidence of tampering. The junction box had been recalibrated to gradually reduce oxygen levels, while reporting normal readings. "This is precise work," Elixa noted, her slender fingers tracing the altered connections. "Only someone with extensive knowledge of our systems could accomplish this." One of the crew, Anders, suggested, glancing toward where the Athetheran survivors huddled in the Nomad's common area. "Impossible," Cell declared, joining them with hand resting on her sidearm. "My security team vetted everyone aboard the Astral Dawn personally." "Well, someone did this," Anders insisted. "And they're either on this ship now, or they left a very sophisticated timer." Tension rippled through the cramped space. Elixa studied the sabotage with clinical detachment, while Cell's posture shifted subtly toward a combat stance. "We should follow protocol," Elixa stated. "Full security lockdown, individual questioning, and technical assessment of all crew members." "That would take hours we don't have," Cell countered. "We need to secure critical systems and establish a protected command structure immediately. Direct action, not bureaucracy." Anders watched the exchange with growing concern. The sisters' disagreement, though professionally stated, hinted at a deeper division in philosophy. More immediately concerning was the saboteur still potentially among them, possibly planning further interference. A cracked viewport prism caught his eye, casting fractured light across the deck plates, a visual reminder of the fractured trust aboard his vessel. The symbolism wasn't lost on him. "Here's what we'll do," he interjected, asserting command of his ship. "Princess Elixa, oversee repairs to the sabotage systems with a security escort of your choosing. Princess Cell, establish a rotating guard detail for critical areas. Everyone stays in pairs, no exceptions." The twins exchanged glances before nodding in agreement. As they moved to implement his instructions, Anders returned to the neural interface, preparing for departure. The Nebula waited, its current shifted since their arrival, presenting new challenges for the journey home. With the crew secured and systems restored, Anders guided the Nomad away from the crippled Astral Dawn, reversing their path through the labyrinth of the vortex. The additional weight made the ship less responsive, requiring more concentration to maintain course through the turbulent gases. Hours passed in tense silence as they navigated outward. Anders remained deep in the neural interface, his consciousness extended throughout the ship. He felt the movements of each passenger, the minute vibrations of whispered conversations, the subtle shifts in environmental systems, as the life support adjusted to the increased load. And beneath it all, a discordant note: something still wasn't right. They were halfway to the nebula's edge when the sensors detected the pursuing vessels. 3 ships, their energy signatures unmistakably Corvalian, modified for Nebula navigation. Not as advanced as the Nomad, but dangerous nonetheless. "We have company," Anders announced, his voice strained from the extended neural connection. "Corvalian pursuit vessels closing fast." Cell was at his side, instantly studying the tactical display. "They must have been waiting outside the nebula, tracked us when we entered. Clever." "Can we outrun them?" Alexa asked, joining them with a datapad in hand. Anders shook his head, feeling the limitations of their situation through the ship's feedback. "Not with our current load. The Nomad was designed for speed and maneuverability, not hauling passengers." "Then we fight Cell," decided, accessing the weapon systems. "The Nomad's shield should give us an advantage." The first energy blast caught them before Anders could respond, rocking the ship violently. Through the neural interface, he felt the impact as pain across his own back, the shields straining to absorb the attack. Holding evasive pattern, he gritted through clenched teeth, pushing the Nomad into a series of maneuvers that sent it spinning through the nebula's gaseous clouds. "Cell, return fire when you have a clear shot. Alexa, I need more power to the aft shields." The twins worked in perfect coordination despite their earlier disagreements. Cell managed the defensive systems with practiced efficiency, while Alexa recalibrated power distribution on the fly, her fingers dancing across control panels as she extracted every bit of performance from the strained systems. The battle intensified as they neared the nebula's outskirts. The Corvalian vessels, clearly familiar with the vortex's patterns, anticipated many of Anders's evasive tactics. A second blast grazed the Nomad's port side, sending cascading feedback through the neural interface that left Anders gasping in agony. "Neural overload imminent," Alexa warned, monitoring his vital signs. "You need to disengage." "Can't," Anders replied through gritted teeth. "Not if we want to survive this." His senses were beginning to blur, the line between himself and the ship dangerously thin. He could feel the nebula's currents, as if they were flowing across his skin, could taste the ionized particles in the air. Warning lights flashed behind his eyelids as the interface exceeded safe parameters. But he pushed through the pain, seeking an advantage in the chaos. There, a dense pocket of magnetically charged gas, nearly invisible to standard sensors. With a thought, Anders altered course, diving toward this natural hazard. The pursuing vessels followed, unaware of the trap. "Brace for turbulence," he warned, seconds before guiding the Nomad into a controlled roll through the gas pocket. The ship shuddered violently, shields flickering as they dispersed the powerful magnetic forces. Behind them, the Corvalian vessels hit the pocket unprepared. 2 managed erratic course corrections, their hulls sparking with discharge. The third spun out of control, its engines momentarily disabled by the magnetic surge. Taking advantage of the confusion, Cell targeted the damaged vessel with a precision strike that disabled its weapons array. "One down," she announced with grim satisfaction. The remaining pursuers regrouped quickly, adopting a pincer movement to trap the Nomad between crossfires. Anders felt their intentions through the nebula's currents, the subtle displacement of gases, telegraphing their approach. "They're trying to box us in," he warned, already adjusting course to counter the strategy. A massive energy surge erupted from the lead Corvalian ship, a concentrated beam aimed directly at the Nomad's cockpit. In the split second before impact, Anders felt a body interposing itself between him and the view screen. Princess Cell had moved with lightning reflexes, activating a personal shield generator that absorbed much of the blast. The force still threw her across the cockpit, her armor smoking from the partial penetration. Cell, Alexa, abandoned her station, rushing to her sister's side as Anders fought to maintain control of the ship. "I'm functional," Cell insisted, though her voice was strained. "Minor burns only. The shield absorbed most of it." Alexa helped her sister to a seat before returning to her console, her movements now charged with cold fury. "I can hack their targeting systems," she announced, fingers flying across the interface. "Give me 2 minutes." Anders pushed the Nomad to its limits, executing maneuvers that strained both the ship and his neural connection. Each turn sent fresh waves of pain through his system, but he refused to relinquish control, knowing their survival depended on his link with the vessel. True to her word, Elixa penetrated the Corvallian communications network in under 2 minutes, jamming their targeting coordination. Now, the effect was immediate. The pursuers' next volley went wide, their synchronized attack pattern dissolving into individual efforts that the Nomad's shields could handle more easily. Taking advantage of the disarray, Anders guided the ship through a particularly dense nebula cloud, using the visual cover to slip away from the immediate pursuit. The maneuver bought them precious moments to regroup and assess their situation. Damage report. He requested, partially disengaging from the neural interface to clear his head. Hull integrity at 87%, Elixa reported. Shields holding but strained. Life support stable. We've lost one auxiliary thruster. Cell added, examining the tactical display from her seat. And the Corvallians will re-establish targeting coordination within minutes. As if in response to her assessment, an encrypted transmission broke through their communications jamming. The message was brief, but chilling. One princess harbors secrets that would destroy the Empire. Verify identity before return. Silence fell over the cockpit as the implications settled. Anders looked between the twins, noting the subtle shift in their postures. Elixa's fingers paused over her console, while Cell's hand drifted toward her sidearm. Corvallian psychological warfare. Cell suggested, though her tone lacked conviction. Perhaps, Elixa agreed cautiously, though the encryption matches our diplomatic channels. Anders felt the weight of suspicion rippling through the ship crew members, exchanging wary glances, trust eroding in real time. The sabotage, the pursuit, and now this warning, pieces of a puzzle he couldn't yet assemble. Before he could address, the new tension sensors indicated the Corvallian vessels regrouping for another attack run. With no time for debate, Anders reconnected fully with the neural interface, focusing entirely on evasion. The next phase of the battle unfolded with brutal intensity. The Corvallians, seemingly desperate to prevent the Nomad's escape, employed increasingly reckless tactics. They launched proximity mines into the nebula clouds, creating chain reactions of energy discharges that forced Anders into ever more complex evasive patterns. Through it all, the twins worked in flawless coordination despite the shadow of suspicion between them. Elixa continued disrupting enemy communications while reinforcing the Nomad's failing systems. Cell managed weapons and shields with precision, born of years of military training. When a lucky shot from the Corvallians disabled one of the Nomad's main thrusters, Anders felt the damage as a searing pain down his left side. Fighting through the agony, he recalibrated the remaining engines, compensating for the asymmetrical thrust. "We need an exit strategy," he gasped, sweat beading on his forehead from the strain. "We can't outrun them forever." Elixa studied her scanner readings with intense focus. "There's a gravitational anomaly 3 degrees off our port bow. The readings suggest a pocket within the nebula, a shelter of sorts. Could be a trap," Cell warned, eyeing the data skeptically. "It's our only option," Anders decided, already adjusting course. "Hold on." The Nomads surged toward the anomaly, the pursuing Corvallians closing the gap behind them. As they approached what appeared to be a solid wall of swirling gases, Anders sent the ship into a spiraling dive that tested the structural limits of the hull. For a terrifying moment, the gases engulfed them completely, sensors overwhelmed by the nebula's chaotic energies. Then, abruptly, they broke through into clear space, a hidden pocket within the vortex, a bubble of calm surrounded by the nebula's rage. The Corvallian pursuers, unable to match the Nomad's precise navigation, veered away at the last moment, rather than risk destruction in the turbulent boundary. Their energy signatures faded as they retreated to safer distances, apparently unwilling to penetrate the pocket's entrance. Status. Anders asked, partially disconnecting from the neural interface now that immediate danger had passed. The sudden silence after hours of battle was almost disorienting. "We're secure for now." Cell confirmed, scanning the perimeter of their sanctuary. The gravitational dynamics of this pocket make it virtually undetectable from outside. A perfect defensive position. And a perfect repair bay, Alexa added, already assessing damage reports. The nebula's energies are dampened here. We can work without interference. Anders nodded wearily, fully disengaging from the neural interface for the first time in hours. The separation left him dizzy and hollow, his own body suddenly foreign after so long connected to the ship. "I need rest," he managed before slumping in the pilot's chair. He awoke some time later in the Nomad's small medical bay. Princess Alexa stood nearby, monitoring readouts on a data pad. When she noticed his consciousness returning, she approached with clinical efficiency. "Neural fatigue," she informed him without preamble. "Expected given the duration and intensity of your connection. No permanent damage, but you'll need another 4 hours before safely re-engaging." Anders sat up slowly, testing limbs that still felt partially disconnected from his brain. "How long was I out?" "6 hours. We've been busy." She gestured to a display showing repair operations throughout the ship. "The damaged thruster is operational again, shields restored to 90% capacity. Cell has established defensive protocols in case the Corvallians discover our location." "And the saboteur?" Anders asked, remembering the life support tampering that had nearly doomed them. Alexa's expression hardened slightly. "We've been investigating. Maintenance logs show unauthorized access to critical systems by Lion, one of our royal aides. She's currently confined to quarters under guard." Anders nodded, processing this information. "That explains the sabotage, but not the warning about one of you harboring secrets. Any thoughts on that?" "Many," Alexa admitted, after a pause. "None I care to share until we're safely back in Athetheran space. Politics among my people are complex." Before Anders could press further, Princess Cell entered the medical bay. Unlike her sister's clinical demeanor, Cell radiated barely contained energy, a predator temporarily caged by circumstance. "You're awake. Good." She assessed him with a warrior's eye. "We need to discuss our next move. The Corvallians are patrolling the nebula's outer boundary. Breaking through will require perfect timing and all your skill." Anders swung his legs over the edge of the bed, testing his balance. "I'll be ready. What's our timeline?" 12 hours, Alexa answered. "The repairs require that minimum time to stabilize. And then we face the High Council." Cell added an uncharacteristic tension in her voice. Anders glanced between them, sensing undercurrents he couldn't quite parse. "Is there something about this rescue I should know, beyond the obvious danger?" The twins exchanged a look laden with unspoken communication, before Cell responded. "There is an ancient covenant between our houses, a debt that must be honored when blood saves blood." "What she means," Alexa clarified, seeing Anders' confusion, "is that by saving the royal lineage, you have activated protocols established millennia ago. The Council will invoke the Covenant of Alliance." "Which means what exactly?" Anders asked, a sense of foreboding growing. "Marriage," Cell stated bluntly. "You must wed one of us to cement the blood alliance between our peoples. It is our oldest and most sacred tradition when an outsider saves royal lives." Anders stared at them, certain he'd misheard. "Marriage to a princess. I'm just a disgraced human pilot." "Who has proven himself worthy through combat and sacrifice," Cell countered. "The Covenant doesn't recognize rank or species, only the debt of life." "This is insane," Anders protested, rising to pace the small confines of the medical bay. "I agreed to a rescue mission, not a political marriage. Surely there's some diplomatic workaround." "The Council is traditional," Alexa explained, her tone carefully neutral. "They will insist on honoring the Covenant to its fullest extent." "And if I refuse?" Anders challenged. "Then you shame both our houses," Cell replied, though her expression suggested she understood his reluctance. "The alliance would be void, and your compensation reconsidered." The implication was clear: no marriage, no payment, no restoration of his reputation. Anders felt trapped between forces beyond his control, much as he had during his court-martial years before. "I need time to think," he said finally. "Of course," Alexa agreed. "But know that the decision ultimately rests with the Council, and with us." She glanced at her sister, another wordless exchange passing between them. As they left him to his thoughts, Anders returned to the cockpit seeking comfort in the familiar environment. The neural interface crown hung suspended above the pilot's chair, its tendrils quiescent for now. In the hours that followed as repairs continued throughout the ship, Anders found himself increasingly in the company of each princess in turn. Alexa sought his assistance with technical modifications, her brilliant mind finding surprising synergies between human intuition and Athetheran precision. Their conversations, though initially focused on ship systems, gradually shifted to philosophy and potential research partnerships. "Your neural adaptation suggests possibilities beyond mere piloting," she observed, as they recalibrated sensor arrays. "Imagine interfaces for medical procedures for scientific exploration in environments too hazardous for physical presence." "Sounds like you're planning for the future," Anders noted. "A future that includes humans as more than occasional allies." "Progress requires diversity of approach," she replied simply. "My people excel at refinement, but humans. You see possibilities where we see only chaos." Cell, by contrast, engaged him in discussions of strategy and combat doctrine. She respected his military background despite his discharge, and seemed to value his unorthodox tactical thinking. "The Nebula battle proved what I've argued for years," she told him as they reviewed the engagement. "Adaptive response trumps rigid protocol when facing unknown variables." "Is that what got you that scar?" Anders asked, gesturing to the mark along her jawline. A rare smile crossed her features. "Precisely. I deviated from established doctrine during a border skirmish. My commander disapproved violently before my approach won the day." "Yet you stayed in service," Anders observed. "I believe in protecting my people," she answered simply, "even when they resist necessary change." These interactions gave Anders insight into the twins' distinct philosophies, Alexa's strategic partnership approach versus Cell's passionate alliance. Both valued progress, but through different means: methodical research or bold action. The 12 hours passed more quickly than Anders would have liked. Final repairs were completed, crew ready at stations, and the time for decision approached. The Nomad sensors indicated that the Corvallian vessels had spread their search pattern, creating a potential opening for escape. Anders reconnected with the neural interface, the sensation now familiar, as ship and man merged consciousness. With careful precision, he guided the Nomad to the boundary of their sanctuary, preparing for the dash to freedom. Course plotted, he announced to the twins who had taken positions at auxiliary control stations. "We'll ride the Nebula's current to gain speed, then break through the patrol line at their weakest point." "And after," Alexa prompted the unresolved question of the Covenant hanging between them. Anders focused on the immediate task, unwilling to commit to a future he hadn't chosen. "First we survive." Initiating departure sequence. The Nomad slipped from its hiding place like a predator from its den, immediately caught in the Nebula's powerful currents. Anders surrendered partially to their flow, conserving energy, while maintaining just enough control to stay on course. The Corvallian patrol detected them within minutes, converging from multiple vectors. But Anders had anticipated this, using the Nebula's electromagnetic properties to mask their true trajectory until the last possible moment. When the pursuers adjusted course to intercept, he executed a maneuver that would have been impossible without the neural interface, a spiraling dive through layered radiation fields that scrambled the Corvallian sensors, while the Nomad's advanced shielding protected its crew. By the time they emerged from the interference, the Nomad had gained critical distance. One final surge of power to the engines, and they broke free of the Nebula's grasp, emerging into clear space with the Corvallian vessels falling behind. Transmission from the Athetheran cruiser. Alexa reported as friendly signals appeared on the long-range scanners. "They're moving to intercept the Corvallians. We're clear to proceed home. Anders maintained full neural connection until they docked safely with the cruiser, unwilling to risk even a moment's vulnerability until the princesses were secure. Only when the docking protocols completed did he finally disengage the separation, leaving him emptier than before. High Counselor Thalon waited in the docking bay flanked by an honor guard in ceremonial armor. His posture was rigid with barely contained emotion as the twins descended the Nomad's ramp, followed by their rescued crew. "My princesses," he greeted them formally, bowing deeply. "Your safe return brings great joy to the Empire." "Thanks to Captain Cade," Sel acknowledged, gesturing toward Anders as he emerged last from the ship. Thalon turned to the human pilot, inclining his head in respect. "You have done what no other could, Anders Cade. The 5 houses stand in your debt." "About that debt," Anders began, but Thalon raised a hand to forestall him. "There will be time for formal proceedings after you have rested. We return to Helios Outpost where the Council awaits." The journey back was mercifully uneventful. Anders spent much of it in his assigned quarters, wrestling with the implications of the Covenant. Marriage to an alien princess was never part of his plan yet. He couldn't deny the connection he'd begun to feel with both Elixa and Sel, each in their own way. More troubling was the political dimension. He'd escaped Navy politics only to find himself embroiled in something far more complex. The warning about secrets that could destroy the Empire lingered in his mind, along with questions about Lion's sabotage and the Corvallians' pursuit. When they arrived at Helios Outpost 2 days later, Anders was startled by the reception that awaited them. The normally chaotic docking area had been transformed with ceremonial decorations in a Thetheran style, and crowds gathered behind security barriers, a mix of species including a surprising number of humans. "Word of your achievement has spread," Thalon explained as they disembarked. "The first successful navigation of the Vortex Nebula is historic." Anders nodded uncomfortably at the attention more concerned with the High Council debate Thalon had mentioned was scheduled for the following day. That evening, he was provided luxurious quarters and left largely to himself, though he noted the guards posted discreetly at his door. Protection or detention, he wasn't entirely sure. When morning came, Elixa arrived to escort him to the council chambers. Her formal attire highlighted the alien grace of her features, the traditional silver robes contrasting with her blue-tinged skin. "The traitor has been identified conclusively," she informed him as they walked. "Lion's communications with the Corvallian Collective were discovered hidden in her personal encryption. She has confessed to sabotage." "And the warning about secrets that could destroy the Empire?" Anders asked. Elixa's expression remained carefully neutral. "A standard Corvallian tactic sow distrust among allies. Nothing more." Anders wasn't entirely convinced, but held his doubts as they entered the council chamber, a circular room with tiered seating, where 7 senior Athetherans waited in ornate chairs. Thalon took his place among them while Princess Sel already stood on a central platform. Anders was directed to join her, acutely aware of the formal gravity of the proceedings. The chief counselor, an ancient Athetheran with pale silver skin, rose to address the gathering. "We convene to honor the Covenant of Alliance." He intoned his translator, rendering the ceremonial language in stiff, formal terms. "Blood has saved blood. The debt must be acknowledged." What followed was a detailed recounting of Anders's rescue mission, with particular emphasis on his willingness to risk his life for the royal twins. Throughout the narration, he stood uncomfortably feeling more like a specimen under examination than a hero being honored. When the recitation concluded, Thalon rose to speak. "The covenant is clear. The human pilot Anders Cade must join with one of the royal house through marriage, cementing the alliance between our peoples. The choice of which princess falls to the council," another member added, "as has been our tradition." Anders stepped forward, then unable to remain silent. "With respect," he interrupted, causing a ripple of murmurs through the chamber. "I cannot accept a marriage arranged without my consent." The chief counselor's vertical pupils narrowed. "The covenant allows no exception. The debt must be paid. Then, I invoked the preservation clause. Anders countered, drawing on his late-night research into Athetheran law. The section that states no alliance can be formed under conditions that would destroy its foundation. A stunned silence fell over the chamber. Princess Cell looked at him with new appreciation, while Elixa's lips curved in the slightest smile. Forcing me to marry against my will would violate the very autonomy your people claim to respect, Anders continued. It would poison any true alliance from the start. Thalon leaned forward, his expression unreadable. You have studied our laws well, Anders Cade. But the preservation clause requires an alternative of equal value to satisfy the debt. I have one, Anders replied confidently. Instead of a marriage that would bind me to one princess while alienating the other, I propose a partnership that honors both. Research initiatives with Princess Elixa to advance neural interface technology for both our species. Exploratory missions with Princess Cell to establish new security protocols for shared space. He paused, meeting the gaze of each council member in turn. A true alliance built on mutual respect and shared goals, not ancient obligation. The council chamber erupted in discussion, members debating furiously in their native language, too fast for the translators to keep pace. Thalon raised a hand for silence, studying Anders with new intensity. Your proposal has merit, he acknowledged finally. But it lacks the symbolic power of the traditional covenant. Symbols matter less than substance. Cell interjected, stepping forward to stand beside Anders. I support this alternative. My skills are better used in joint operations than in ceremonial marriage. As do I, Elixa added, joining them. The research potential alone justifies the adaptation of tradition. The council deliberated further, their debate occasionally heated. Anders waited, knowing he had placed everything on one bold gambit: his payment, his reputation, and his freedom. Finally, Thalon rose again. The council accepts your alternative, Anders Cade, with one condition. You will remain officially designated as friend of the Five Houses, with all the responsibilities and privileges thereof. This status is irrevocable and binding. Anders exhaled slowly, relief washing through him. I accept. The formal proceedings concluded with ceremony, but the real celebration began afterward when the twins led Anders to a private chamber, where Jace waited with a bottle of Earth whiskey. You magnificent bastard, his old wingman greeted him. From disgraced pilot to alien diplomat in one impossible mission. You always did know how to make an entrance. Anders accepted a glass, the familiar burn of the liquor grounding him after days of alien politics. I just wanted to fly. Everything else was unexpected. The best alliances often are, Elixa observed, sampling the whiskey with scientific curiosity. Speaking of unexpected, Anders said, turning to Thalon, who had joined them. I believe we discussed compensation. The High Counselor's expression might have been a smile on a human face. Already transferred to your accounts. Your ship has also been upgraded with Athetheran technology as a gesture of good faith for future missions. Anders raised his glass in acknowledgement. To new partnerships, then. As the informal gathering continued, he found himself drawn to the viewport, where Helios Outpost's twin suns were setting, casting the docking bay in golden light. Below, he could see the Nomad berthed alongside the repaired Astral Dawn, the two ships side by side, like a visual metaphor for the alliance he'd helped forge. Princess Cell joined him at the viewport, her warrior stance relaxed for perhaps the first time since he'd met her. You chose well, she said simply. Better than tradition would have dictated. I chose freedom, Anders corrected. For all of us. The same thing in the end, she replied. The freedom to choose one's path is the only true foundation for honor. From across the room, Elixa caught his eye, raising her glass in silent acknowledgement. Between them stretched possibility, not the forced ceremony of ancient covenant, but something potentially more lasting, alliance built on choice, respect, and mutual advantage. Anders turned back to the viewport, watching as station lights came on against the darkening sky. The Vortex Nebula was just visible from this vantage, a distant swirl of violet and crimson against the black. He had navigated its impossible currents and emerged transformed, no longer defined by his past disgrace, nor bound by others' traditions. Whatever challenges waited in the joint missions ahead, he would face them on his own terms. The Nebula had been his crucible, but the future would be his choice, navigated with the same intuition and courage that had guided the nomad through the storm. "Two impossible journeys," he murmured, raising his glass to the stars beyond the viewport. "And to finding our way home." Cell added softly beside him, her voice carrying the weight of one who understood that home was not always a place, but a truth found through trial and triumph. In the reflection of the viewport glass, Anders could see the gathered company behind them, humans and Athetherans, together, the beginning of something new, against the backdrop of ancient space. The debt was satisfied, but the journey was just beginning.